So you've decided to take up the hobby of bonsai trees, but you're not too sure where to start. Today I'm going to discuss the 3 most accessible ways to get started in bonsai, and I'll talk about the pros and cons of each approach so that you can decide which path suits you best and get started. The 3 approaches to start in bonsai are 1. Growing from seed. Option 2. Buying a plant from a big box store or a garden centre or nursery and training it with the intention of turning that into a DIY bonsai. And then the 3rd option is to purchase a ready-made starter bonsai tree from a bonsai nursery or online and continuing to enhance that tree and enjoy it in its pre-made form. Let's look at growing bonsai from seed. So you can either buy just a bag of generic tree seeds online, or you can get these ready prepared grow your own bonsai seed kits, which come with a selection of seeds, a little bit of soil and some pots so that you can begin germination. This option is very low cost. It can also be a very fulfilling way to get started. You're present throughout their entire life cycle. You have input into the entire process, the shape, right from day one. There are some disadvantages with growing from seed though. First of all, it takes a long time to go from germination to a bonsai tree. That's because in the initial couple of years, you'll be concentrating on growing and thickening the main stem so that it resembles a tree trunk. From there, you'll start developing the branch structure. There is another disadvantage with growing from seeds that I don't see discussed quite enough, and that's the high failure rate. If you think of all the thousands and thousands of seeds each tree produces in a single year, and contrast that with the amount of actual trees that we have growing, you realise that the vast majority of seeds don't make it to be mature plants. And the same is true when we're cultivating seeds for bonsai. We might plant 20 seeds and only a fraction of those make it to be a bonsai tree. Unless we've got experience developing bonsai trees, the ones that do make it might have character traits that we look at and think, if I knew what I knew now, I would have done things a lot differently. We still enjoy the trees and love them for what they are, something that we've grown with. But I can certainly tell you that I've got trees in my garden that I look at and think, yeah, that was a mistake. I should have done that differently. Also, growing from seed can be quite finicky. A lot of species require various protocols just to get them to germinate. So it might be that you buy a packet of seeds and make one tiny little mistake and none of them germinate. For that reason, I say that growing from seed is a numbers game. It's better to start with a lot of seeds, and then you can be confident that at least some of them will be pleasing bonsai trees at the end of the process, rather than these starter kits that you get with 15 seeds, some of which are going to not germinate, some won't make it for the first year, and some might end up to have weirdness that you end up being displeased with in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years' time. Please don't think that I'm hating on growing from seed. I'm starting seeds right now and I'll film the entire process, so consider subscribing. Growing from seed is a hugely satisfying process. It's a lot of fun, even if the trees that you end up with aren't traditionally accepted as bonsai. You still have a relationship with them, you still enjoy them, and that's all that matters. I'm just trying to put all the cards on the table so that you can make a decision about which approach is right for you. Growing from seed is an approach that is most suitable for people with a lot of patience, just general plant lovers who love the process rather than the result, or if you're on an extremely low budget and just want to see how you get on before you make a bigger investment. I remember when I decided to try and grow a lot of larch from seed, I bought quite a high number of seeds and I think I had 2 pop up, and that was something like less than 1% germination rate. I think the substrate I had was too wet, or maybe I didn't get the stratification process right. Yeah, that was a bit of a disappointing result. On the other hand, I've got some pines that I've been growing from seed. You know, I look at these pines and I think, oh, I'm really, really proud of you guys. And all they are really is just plants in pots. They're not bonsai yet. They don't even look like bonsai trees. They're just pines. So just imagine how I'm going to feel in another 5, 10 years time when they're, you know, actually looking like proper bonsai. Can't wait. I can wait, I've got no choice. Okay, option 2 is a DIY bonsai from an existing potted plant. The advantages of this approach is that you save a whole bunch of time versus starting from seed, because straight away you've got a plant that is established, super robust. If you choose wisely, it'll have a nice little trunk, maybe some branches that you can work with. So in that sense, you get a lot further along in the process straight away. Also, it's very accessible because there are loads of stores, garden centres, nursery, online websites selling plants. So it's really easy to just pick up something relatively cheap, $5, $10, $20. You've got this tree in front of you and you can immediately start thinking about the design and the styling phase. In terms of disadvantages, the first that jumps out at me is that you have a little bit less control in the appearance of the tree. You go to your store or your garden centre, you have a look what they've got and you choose the most appealing selection. So you're limited by the options you've got in front of you. Another disadvantage is that plants that aren't grown with the intention of being trained as bonsai can have certain aesthetic issues that either take time to correct or just make it unappealing as bonsai material. As long as you choose wisely, most material can make pleasing bonsai trees, especially for your first tree. I think it's more important to get started with something than it is to be a perfectionist. If something has a structural issue in bonsai terms, it just takes longer to get to a stage where we're happy with it. On the other hand, you might say, I don't care, I love the character that this plant's got, I'm going to make this plant the best bonsai that I can possibly make it. I think that's a great approach, and it's certainly what I try to nurture in my own practice. I look for the material with the most potential that I can possibly find, and then try to make the absolute best bonsai tree from that I can. A common example is that the plants tend to be buried quite deeply in their pots, and what you often get is a root springing out from the side of the trunk. And so instead of the trunk tapering to get narrower as we go up, like we expect and see often with trees in the wild, the trunk tapers and then gets wider where the root has grown and strengthened and thickened. I had that with a field maple, cut it off, left a very big scar. So for the longest time I've been healing that scar. So it added some years to the development process of that tree. But overall, it still saved me a bunch of time. And when we do eventually get to the stage where I can say, here's my bonsai, I'll be so glad that I invested that time and effort. It'll mean so much more to me that we've got that story. A DIY bonsai from a potted plant is going to be suited for people who are really creative, but a little bit less patient, and also like to learn new things and learn quite quickly, because the styling process and the horticultural needs of, for instance, doing a repot from a deep pot to a shallower pot do have some techniques that you'll need to learn. There's a lot of decisions in terms of which branches you cut off and which branches you keep. So you need to have a reasonable degree of confidence. But if you want to get going quickly, you don't mind spending a bit more money, and you enjoy the creative process, this is definitely going to be the approach for you. Another common thing, especially when you're less experienced with plants, is to do the first repot on this tree in a deeper pot, trying to go down to a shallower training pot and end up losing the tree, either because the timing wasn't great or you misjudged how much energy the tree had and ended up removing a bit too much roots. That's certainly something I've done several times. So although you're not risking too much if you haven't spent too much money, there is a bit of a risk that mistakes can be made. Finally, there's getting a pre-made starter bonsai tree. Often these can be picked up really cheap, but generally speaking, this is the more expensive option. On the other hand, straight away you've got your bonsai tree. It's got a nice little trunk, maybe some branches starting to develop, and it's in one of those nice ceramic containers. You bring it home, you put it in the garden, and there is your bonsai tree in all its aesthetic glory. The advantages are you save a bunch of time in growing a trunk. Some of the design decisions have been made for you in terms of the branches that it's got and how the canopy might be taking shape. Now you get to maintain or enhance its aesthetic as a bonsai tree. There are disadvantages with buying a starter bonsai tree. The first is that they can be more expensive. If you're extremely creative, you can sometimes have limited options for the styling direction of your bonsai, as a lot of the decisions have been made for you to get it to that stage. If you're less experienced with plants in general, it can be tricky to discern a healthy from an unhealthy example. So you might end up with a tree that needs some nursing before you can practice your bonsai techniques with it. Finally, the roots can need some maintenance. These starter trees are grown for speed to begin with, so they're not always in the optimum soil conditions for bonsai health. So when it comes to repotting, I often see people who are hesitant to do the work that they need, and in the long term this can lead to health issues of the tree. The type of person that a starter bonsai is going to be the best approach are people who want to jump straight into the actual bonsai techniques rather than the development techniques. So the less patient people who don't have the time to invest in starting from scratch. People who have prior plant experience, so maybe you've got some house plants, so you're confident in watering and finding the best position and environment for your plants and trees. Or maybe you've got an experienced friend or a local club that can help you should you have any questions or difficulties. To keep up the momentum on your journey, sign up for the Gro Bonsai newsletter. It contains tips, seasonal advice, as well as fun challenges for you to get stuck into. It is the best bonsai beginner newsletter available. I'm also on our Discord server every day ready to answer your questions. The links are in the description below and in the pinned comment. Now that you're getting serious, have a look at this video to find out the essential tools needed to get started in bonsai.